Yeah, so Dr. Kamala Srinivas is an associate professor in the Department of Philosophy at SIES College of Arts, Science and Commerce, Sion, Mumbai, affiliated to University of Mumbai for the past 19 years, teaching UG courses and 10 years PG courses. She's a recognized PhD guide. Her PhD is in philosophy. Her thesis title is Environmental Concerns of Rabindranath Tagore and Quasi-Viredu, a cross-cultural philosophical analysis. So, I think I'll give you more time to speak rather than read out all your bio. So over to you, Kamala.
Thank you so much for being so short and sweet. Thank you very much, and for giving me that time. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity. Actually, this is one of the kind of conference that I'm attending, Indica, at such a blessed place, right? So we have come a full cycle from day one. I'm looking at it like that. So we started off with saying that this place is an educational center, once upon a time a cultural hub, and we have been again talking a lot about the Guru-shishya parampara. I pay my homage to all the gurus of our country, as well as my guru. And I also want to thank all the scholars prior in all these 3 days and coming to the last session for setting the groundwork for me to start off with. And when I've titled my paper as Critical Thinking Pedagogy in Philosophical Traditions of Ancient India, I am looking at critical thinking pedagogy as the Guru-shishya parampara itself. I want to say that we had an enriching Guru-shishya parampara, which was oral, and as it has been discussed throughout these 3 days, that what was happening in this Guru-shishya parampara? How did the Guru impart the knowledge, and what was happening at the receiving end of the knowledge? So I am trying to put forth in front of the forum that the Guru-shishya parampara itself is a critical thinking pedagogy. That's how I like to look at it. So therefore, as an introduction to the paper, I want to again put it across to the forum that Guru's understanding of learner's ability. So what is this critical thinking pedagogy all about? That the Guru very well understood throughout that span of life that a Shishya spent with him or her, happened to have this complete understanding of the learner. That means the capacity building, that means the holistic understanding. So who is going to be the learner? What kind of knowledge is going to be imparted? And how is the learner grasping it? Right? So whether it was the, again, the very classical setup of getting up early in the morning, orally transmitting the theoretical understanding, then later, spending time doing other kind of activities or any kind of other alternative disciplines that the Shishya was put into. You can see that India has a rich tradition of learning and education right from the time immemorial. And from its early beginnings, and even today, a teacher and student together recite the above mantra, that is the again, very well rendered by Dr. Sri Prada when she sang that Om Sahana Bhavatu. So there was a kind of a universal consciousness generated when the Guru used to again exchange that learning in harmony with the student. So I believe again, philosophy emphasizes on critical thinking and valid reasoning, where the Guru understood that the learner has a reasoning, an analysis, an evaluating, a decision making, and a problem solving. And this put together is what the critical thinking skills has to be incorporated in the students. So again, I want to thank Dr. Mala happened to say that where philosophy and psychology has to come together and has to take place in this kind of an interaction. So I insist that this critical thinking which the Guru understood, that it can be inculcated, enhanced, built up to take the student from a very humble level to a transforming level, could happen only if this communication is going to be ongoing between the Guru and the learner. Secondly, we have been again talking about this entire philosophy of ancient Indian education, which was imported through the 14 Vidyasthanas and 64 Kalas, and having visited Sandipani yesterday was another kind of a blessed feeling for me to look at it from a holistic point of view. So we have seen that the 4 Vedas, again, our education in ancient India had emerged in accordance with the philosophy of Vedas, its ultimate aim being the obtaining of liberation or moksha. It was essentially the education that aimed at the refinement of the mind and also to prepare oneself to live normal, simple life. Education was supposed to free the human being of all earthly bondages. The mind, the chitta, as today morning Nritya ji happened to focus on, is the cause of the bondage and liberation. If one loses control over the mind, it leads to bondage. Control of the mind is the path towards ultimate liberation. Education was supposed to be a way for chitta vritti nirodha, controlling the vicissitudes of the mind. In the Vedic period, learning did not mean merely the acts of listening, reading, and writing. And that is what, through the 14 Vidyasthanas, we have been again harping through various many presentations in these 2 days. So learning was equal to the realization of one's own self. Education was a process of self-realization and self-actualization. The axiology of the Vedic era did not distinguish the social values and the personal values. Both the personal and the social values are part of the proclaimed universal eternal values that were Satyam, Shivam, and Sundaram. This Indian view of the identity of personality and conduct with teaching is well rendered in criticism to education system as proclaimed in the West. I refer here to Henrik Zimmer, who states that, I quote, "The real attainment is only what finds confirmation in one's own life," unquote. The worth of a person's overt expression depends on the degrees to which one's life itself is an example of self-learning. And that's how the Puranas, the Itihasas, the Dharmashastras, the Smritis happen to bring out that overall self-learning and imbibe that into the learner. So the approach of our Vedic seers and sages towards life, their subtle analysis and codification of duties all indicate their cherished spiritual values. Their political as well as social realities were not circumscribed within the narrow geographical bounds. Their attitude to life was characterized by depth and width of vision, and they identified their duty with devotion to this ideal summum bonum of humankind. So therefore, multidimensional progress was not just one's own kind, but all of humankind became the sole objective of Indian civilization. So whether it was our Shastras, whether it was our the Shatadarshanas, all happened to have this kind of an underpinning. Similarly, the Vedic tradition also, the Indian tradition, also happened to originate in the principles prescribed as Varnashram Dharma and Purusharthas, which we have been talking about. The former, classified as Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, directed the activities of the entire nation into productive and useful channels, which we saw in Dr. Kakkar's paper also, where how we have transmitted this kind of a knowledge from generations together within the Varna itself. There is a very fascinating paper, I must agree and admit here. So the great mass of people became industrious. Honesty in trade and diligence in arts reached a high level of excellence. The latter, known as Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, determined one's pursuit in life. Ancient Indian education has its own peculiar importance for a harmonious development of physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of human life. It helped a lot in the development of character and individuality of human beings. So the critical thinking as practiced in Guru-shishya tradition happened to be on the aspects of memorization, on critical approach, on introspection, on storytelling, question-answer method, seminars. I think so I speak the less because we have heard this quite repeatedly. Okay. The highlight of my paper is on these 2 slides which are coming up, which I want to put it in 2 contexts. So how am I looking at critical thinking pedagogy? It's at the 2 level. Allow me again, the first part has been told already. I am only trying to present in other style, the way I perceive it. Again, Dr. Srinivas happened to talk about the TIKW model yesterday. I'm looking at it from a stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 point of view, wherein when it comes to the philosophy of Vedas, which treated reality as a divine perfection, Vedas considered as holy scriptures consisted of the theory of metaphysics that was revealed to the disciples through the learning of the Vedas. So the oral transmission of knowledge was the accepted system. The concept of the reality, quote unquote, had developed based upon the Vedas and Upanishads. Hence, the process of instruction was based on 3 steps like Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. So the education model was mostly student-centered, with each center of education being known by the popular dialogues and discussions that have been taking place in the Gurukula system. As Dr. Uma ma'am happened to just mention, disciples in the ashram were under the sole guidance of the Guru. So that's what the situated practices happens to focus at. In ancient India, education was not burdened with any pre-planned mundane aims of material objectives, but rather it was just the process of a man-making education. So the Guru had this idea that the student who is going to graduate from this Gurukula is going to carry forward not only the legacy of the Gurukula, but has to stand by oneself to represent oneself to the community, to the world, and make certain decisions for self-transformation. So which aimed at to develop a mundane individual to an active individual of responsibilities and with divine powers. So the major aim of education during the Vedic period was to provide training for the youngsters in performing their social, political, economic, and religious duties. It also aimed at the preservation of culture. So it was not just the individual's development was necessary, but it also had a pratha, it also had a samskara. So the culture has to be preserved was again an underpinning idea behind that. So transformation of character, personality development, and the inculcation of moral values. Of course, there were certain classified aims like learning the canonical text, learning the Purusharthas, acquiring values, learning epics and Puranas, understanding Rajyatantra, and knowing about the life after death. Now here again, Paul Dosa, a very renowned writer, stated that in the Upanishads, I quote again, there are philosophical conceptions unequaled in India or perhaps anywhere else in the world, unquote. The second part of my presentation, which again focuses on the feature of critical thinking pedagogy, highlights that the Guru happened to enable and empower the student to externalize wisdom by internalizing knowledge was considered as a must, and the student should be able to externalize that knowledge. So that is the highlight of my paper, where I'm talking about reflective thinking and reflexive thinking as a critical thinking pedagogy itself. So it is a self-realization, and it involves both reflective and reflexive thinking, which is the outcome of critical thinking. So in the present time, the problem is as much about how we are taught as much as it is about what is being taught. I think in the morning, somebody asked how to teach it, right? So the critical thinking pedagogy is the way to teach it. Teach that one has to reflect on what you have as a content resources, and what are you going to do after learning. So it is just not to say what I know is no, but how do I know it also important, and how do I communicate that knowledge is also important. So am I practically using it? Am I actually exercising that knowledge? Is what one needs to ask that question. So in the present time, the problem is as much about how are we taught, as much as it is about what is being taught. So our concern is more so with human thinking, as we are skillfully training not only job seekers, but also job makers. In order to fulfill this, critical thinking needs to be reconceived as both reflective and reflexive. So reflective is the sense of deep thought about something. So I look at reflection helps one to understand the world is the reality where I am, where I live. I have to make my living here. And reflexive as taking account of oneself, and this includes seeing the effects that one thinking has both within and outside oneself. So reflexivity helps me as a learner to construct as well as create the meaning of the world with oneself. So how do I deal with the Jagat? How do I deal with the worldly affairs? How do I deal with all the kind of interrelationships with which I am bound with? So these two kinds of looking within are very connected, because reflection is necessary for reflexivity, and the latter in turn enhances the qualities of one's reflections. Because to know is not enough. In this course, we learn to do so both within about the fields of study of of study we engage, thereby taking reflections to the reflexive level. Lastly, I have made certain correlations between the ancient Indian education system and the modern education system. Where do they both converge, and where have they certain similarities as far as the ancient and the modern system is concerned. So there are significant features I see between ancient and modern education system. So education in India has developed through years of refinement. It had almost all attributes a modern education system possesses. Some of the specific features mentioned below are in this table. So I am walking you through certain similarities that is there. So ancient Indian education developed in Gurukula method, whereas in modern school we have that education being imparted in school. It is completely free to choose any school, either visit it regularly or opt for residential. So you have a choice here. There it was only purely residential. Secondly, I can see that education of an individual in the olden times commenced with a ceremony called Upanayana. Here the process is through orientation and admissions. Thirdly, we can see that in Indian education system, education in the Gurukula extended from 16 to 14 years. Say, for example, as a minimum qualification of graduation. Say, for example, from the school level to the graduation level. Similarly, here it is from 4 years to 21 years. Again, from school level to the graduation level. So the guru paid full attention to the psychological and physical makeup of their students. The teacher pays full attention to psychological, emotional, physical well-being. We're talking about mentor-mentee relationship. We're talking about the elder students becoming, the senior students becoming the mentors for the youngsters, and so on and so forth. So how the guru happened to extend and make the whole atmosphere inclusive, which I can see very much happening even in today's time. Similarly, all students, this is a very interesting correlation because I teach in college and this is what we tend to do. So all students, irrespective of their socio-familial status, had to go for seeking alms. It is a very powerful step for eradicating the arrogance, egotism and superiority feeling from the learners. And here you can see how students participate in NCC, NSS, co-curricular activities, which is again under NEP revived back. So there are 2 credit courses again to be earned by the students. Unless and until you do this course, you do not complete that course. So you can see the complete revival happening here back again. Similarly, you have the 3 educational institutions, Gurukul, Parishad, Sammelan. You have the school, college and the university. Lastly, the syllabus in Vedic education included proper pronunciation and recitation of the Vedas, the rules of sacrifice, grammar, composition, all those things. Similarly, here it is not only the Vedas are being still learnt as the part of the syllabus in many institutions, but also we have involved so many specific studies such as humanities, science, commerce, mass media, and so on and so forth, keeping the necessary, proficiencies that is required for competency in jobs. Lastly, so the subject studies are here, so many for the 14 Vidyasthanas we were talking about and the 64 Kalas we were talking about earlier. Similarly, here it is also today gender studies, culture studies, technology, AI, all these things, adding on to the existing system. These are my references, and thank you so much once again, Indica, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this learning process, and I'm going to take back a lot of take-home messages. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So if you have questions for both the sessions, this one as well as the previous one, please go ahead.
Hello. Hello, ma'am. You gave me so much to think about. I think I got a little lost after the point where you said reflection and reflexivity. So what would be the difference between, is the individual reflecting or are they perceiving? Okay. I use the different word perceiving because every individual, you said person reflects the world, right? But the world is different for different people,
okay,
right? They perceive differently based on the shape that they are,
correct,
based on the shape of patra that they are, yes, in my understanding,
yes,
right? And that patra is not good patra or bad patra.
Correct.
For example, if you teach critical thinking to 3 people, one person, when academic in nature, would learn academic critical thinking. They would read the articles critically. One person would develop artistic critical thinking in the sense when they would watch something, they would watch it critically. And then the third person would perhaps develop there is academic, artistic, and then performance kind of critical thinking, that how should I do something? Maybe, this could, functional critical thinking, that's the word, functional critical thinking, as in how to better solve a problem, that kind of critical thinking.
Okay.
So, based on the patra that they have, think they would perceive. So, what is the difference between reflection and perception, in my sense?
Okay. The reflection begins with perception. Let me put it that way. Okay? So, am I receiving knowledge? Is it part of my sense perception? Yes, I'm receiving knowledge. Then, what do I do once I perceive this is what my knowledge is? I have to give an examination, right? I have to fulfill certain credits in that examination. So, is my reflection been recorded there? So, in the earlier system, was the student able to follow the instruction of the Guru? So the Guru is to say, okay, we have done today's course. Now you go, do this kind of a job, fulfill this kind of an activity, come back with whatever resources that I want you to. So was the student or the learner able to understand, comprehend, and bring back that to the Guru and give to the Guru? So that's the reflection part. So am I seeing the world the way it is told to me, this is what the world is, and am I able to bring that understanding about the world that I'm living in? I'm looking at it reflection that way. I'll give you my personal example to add to that fourth dimension what you asked, and how my reflexivity worked, okay? Now, how do I look at the reflexivity part? Say, you have the answer in the question itself. So, are our critical thinking pedagogy tools encompassing, all-inclusive, and when we are talking about NEP, and when we are talking about we want other discipline students to take this as a critical thinking tool in their specific disciplines and apply it in their specific way. So is that channel that we want to bridge between a person who is comprehending, understanding, and the way I have to implement in my life per se, in the discipline domain knowledge that I'm using, is that critical thinking helping me? Now, this is again, we have just started, we have made a good beginning. And thanks to Indica again, talking about and bringing all these knowledge repositories, and we are also documenting it. So we have got a long way to go when it comes to how reflexivity is working. This has been working. I'm not saying it is not working. Reflexivity has been there. But again, this has become like, watertight compartments working in certain ways, and they are like clueless with each other. That's how the reflexivity is working.
Could an additional exercise of deepening perception or deepening reflection be added into this exercise between reflection and reflexivity?
Oh yes, it is part of the process.
And exactly, it would keep evolving then in that case.
Exactly, the deep thinking is part of the process.
Working on the koshas and yoga.
Absolutely.
And,
That's why I said all of you have laid the foundation for me. So we need to bring in all this together and maybe design a curricula that way. How did it work in my case? And I want to share this with Dr. Nagaraj also. So when I thought of, when I was in my post-graduation, and when I decided that I want to take up teaching as my profession, after my post-graduation, I decided, sir, that I will do my B.Ed. And so post-graduation, you actually go further. You do either an MPhil or a post-graduation. No, I went back. And when I approached this private institution, which was, running this course, so I went with my certificate and I said, I want admission. So the principal outrightly said that you will not get a B.Ed admission because philosophy is not a school subject. And you cannot teach philosophy in school. This is what I was told. I put my foot down there. And thanks to philosophy and teachers like them who said that apply your reflexivity wherever required, whenever required. Put your stand firmly there. So I had to put my foot down there. On what basis are you denying me a B.Ed education? Come on, prove it to me. So the principal had no say. Okay, give me an examination. Fortunate my reflection. So I had a hands-on experience of, I myself was struggling with mathematics and science. Sorry, all respect to my mathematics and science teachers, but how did I learn mathematics and science? I said, let me, along with my 8th, 9th, 10th higher school studies, let me teach students of lower classes of math science. And that's how my fundamentals in math science got strengthened, and I could exercise and practice my higher studies math science like that. So all that, what I was teaching for the young minds, helped me to crack the examination of B.Ed. And I said that, here go, I'm ready for the test. Tell me when do you want to come. I cracked the exam. She had no choice but to give me admission. And I did my B.Ed. Because I said that I want to teach philosophy in undergraduation. So that's how I became a teacher. And this is what I share with my students also. So those who are taking interest in teaching, and they come back and tell me, you have an example in front of you. Don't tell me that philosophy is a school subject and you don't get admission. Go get your admission in B.Ed colleges. And there are students who are doing B.Ed with philosophy.
Just because it is not a subject that is being taught in the school, we don't get B.Ed admission for philosophy students. I'm fighting for that. And we say at all levels that philosophy includes everything that you're talking about in terms of literature, in terms of critical thinking. It is required for any student, for that matter. And therefore, now, as each case and every case to case, a lot of my students have done B.Ed now. A lot of them are also doing PhD now. They want to come back and teach. What is wrong if a teacher wants to teach and you are asking for a particular degree to add a value to it? Only then you can become a teacher. If I'm a passionate teacher, I don't need, of course, a degree is required these days, right? These are the things that NEP is cracking now, which I'm very happy about it. As long as you have a skill, as long as you have a passion, and as long as you're able to earn your credits, which are colleges like us, we are ready to give. If a student is knocking at my door, I think maybe it will take a decade or so. I'm not seeing it very optimistically immediately, but there is a hope. Thank you.
So, ma'am, first of all, been privileged to witness you live. I know I studied MA Philosophy in Mumbai University, but never witnessed your lecture. So, great to have you here today. Okay. So, ma'am, I have just two things, one for you and one from the other ma'am. You mentioned about questions, right? And you also talk about Socratic method of questioning. Now I think, again, in the current context, the questioning has got a lot of importance. Especially, there is something about the new age coaching that is different from mentoring. And I am pursuing the international accreditation there. And every time it has been told that you are not supposed to give any answers. The whole fundamentals of coaching is that you have to ask the right questions at the right time. And the insight has to come from the opposite participant. So how do you see that from the pedagogical tool? Because we have a good option to really explore that. And that is really, especially post-pandemic, it is really offshoot to a great level.
I think when we want to ask questioning as a method, as a tool itself of learning, the space that is created in the academic world should be of that kind, very conducive enough, where the child is not intimidated, the child is not being fooled or, felt very sad about asking a question, whether it's a silly to sacred, any question. Then once you are able to create a space, then you allow the child to ask any question. We may not ask the way Socrates asked for a question and transform the youth of Athens, and therefore what ended up with a hemlock is not the question of the story that we are going to hand it on. What is important is whatever it is bubbling in your head, puzzling in your heart, might as well finish it off then and there before you leave that room. So encouraging that is more important, therefore it's a tool. Therefore I call it as a tool. So the teacher has to accept all kind of challenges and questions. Maybe there may be a question that the child is asking, I may not have an answer, but let me have that humility to say that, give me some time, I may have to do a reference. Give me some time, I may also check on this and come back and answer. Nothing wrong in it. That is where you drop your ego, isn't it? And that is so essential for learning, both for the teacher and for the student. Yeah? Okay.
And ma'am, for the critical thinking, as you mentioned, again, that's as per the World Economic Forum, that is second most important skill required by 2025 and 2030.
Yes.
So how do you see the scope of Indian pedagogy being contributing a big factor there?
A big way, because we are going to offer that to the students in our college. So we have devised a critical thinking curriculum design, and we are going to offer that to students across all the disciplines in our college. So I'm seeing that there is a big way to go. We have made a beginning, yes. And the past 3 years under autonomy, so this is under NEP this year, right? So under autonomy, we have experimented this course across all the disciplines, and we have got a favorable feedback. In fact, in the pre-conference, I was talking to Dr. Nagaraj saying that, can I bring my case studies of those? He said, not necessary, but I would like to share that, yes, we have done a case study analysis of science students taking critical thinking, and commerce students taking critical thinking, data science students taking critical thinking, and they are doing big things with it. Yep.
Yeah, Kamalaji, Munit this side.
Yes.
Yeah. Just one, there are some points which I would request you to maybe go and little bit more, analyze in multi-dimensional ways. Some of the points which I would like to highlight is, you have mentioned in your PPT that all the Gurukulas were residential. So maybe, a dimensional study of Jati Gurukulas.
Yes.
Or, the Agraharas.
Yes.
And the schools which yesterday, one of the presented,
Yes.
the Chennai schools.
Yes.
So, those were inherently not residential.
Absolutely.
So maybe,
Yes, sir.
understanding that from Dharampalji's work
Very
or
much.
Ravindra
As I
Sharmaji's
said, I'm going to
work
take
will-
home all those things, and I want to
Yeah.
work upon that in detail.
Second point, which is the 64 Kalas and 14 Vidyas, where was a comparison made with the current, I think an in-depth analysis of what really, because, for example, farming is one of the
64 colors.
Yeah, 64 Kalas, but there is no school teaching farming today.
Yes.
So might be good to, have a comparative study, because otherwise what happens is it becomes very generic comparison. I think when we do a research, it will be good to have a very specific, and how many schools are offering, how many kalas out of 64 kalas in your mainstream education. And even if it is it getting the same share as is mathematics or science?
Yeah. Here I would like to share an experience of ours. So we take students to field visit. So we had been in Maharashtra, again, as ma'am was saying, understanding your own state, understanding your own region, keeping that as an objective is what we conduct these field visits. So we had visited this place called as Jalgaon in Maharashtra, where we have this Jain irrigation industrial setup. Now, and we have been to many other industrial setup. Now, what we found in Jain irrigation plant is that they have an agro-based institution as such, which is after, say, 12th board exams, is what they tend to get enrolled as an undergraduation. So throughout there is an agriculture. So what has happened in the country, we can see in the recent times is, we have prioritized certain kalas, and we have taken up as per the requirement of our socio-economic need, I can say, and we have kept it very minimal. As you are suggesting rightly, we need to take to the wider extent of it. So having acknowledged that we have had this rich tradition, why not again revive it and try to make it? And I think so many states today through statecraft and handicraft again are mobilizing this kind of an activity, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for both your presentations, because the question of how to bring it into regular education is a very big question, and we are also dealing with similar questions for music and other traditional arts as well. But my question is specific to critical thinking. Should there be, can there be a more nuanced articulation when it comes to embodied knowledge? Specifically because, and this is a trend I'm seeing, I personally have students who are science students coming from premier institutions in Pune, who try to apply the idea of critical thinking to the learning of music, and they demand that they will start asking questions right at the beginning. And in embodied knowledge, it doesn't work like that. And then I'm going to stick my neck out and say, critical thinking is being weaponized against tradition. And hence, can there be a more nuanced way that comes actually from IKS that is doing studies on critical thinking, so that before other people bring it, we ourselves resolve it?
Exactly, yeah.
Like what Nitya was saying in the morning, that whether we understand or not, all of them should know the Yoga Sutras first by heart. And just obey it. So obey the tradition. so that we cannot move away from the tradition, which is very important. After that, whether you have the knowledge and the intelligence and the wisdom and all that to do it, yes, we agree. I think that structure of that is very essential. Well taken.
The commander, you just command. Relax. We'll answer your questions later. First learn.
No, I think